The other day, I sat down with Shane Monahan, ex-professional rugby player, and I had so many questions for him that we ended up talking for almost 2 hours. I wanted to know everything about his career transition from professional rugby player to now being an entrepreneur. So many questions, and thankfully, he was really, really generous with his time. He answered all my questions, sometimes before I even got to them. I hope that you enjoy this first part of the interview. The second part will be released very soon. If you haven't already followed or subscribed to Your Big Career Move, then now is your chance, because then you'll be the first to know about the next episode when it comes out. If you do enjoy this chat, then why not share it with somebody that you know would really enjoy it? Maybe somebody who's interested in rugby or is contemplating a career change of their own. I know that I love it when people share podcast episodes with me, because there are so many podcasts out there. Sometimes it's hard to know what to listen to. So if somebody shares something with me that they know I'll be interested in, then I'm really grateful, because it saves me loads of time. And while you're here, if you're considering your own big career move and you've got a few doubts still in your mind, then I've prepared 10 questions just for you. You can find those on my website, which is yescareercoaching.com. And I'm sure these questions will help before you make your big career move. I hope that you enjoy my chat with Shane Monahan. Thanks so much, Shane, for joining me today. It's a real pleasure to have you. We met quite a few years ago, and then we've both gone on and done things, and then your name popped up again, and I was like, this is a guy that I need to speak to, because he's got such an awesome story. And I know it probably would all rugby fans know your name, Shane? I don't know.
Not quite. No, unfortunately, I didn't have a long enough career for a lot of people to know me. But saying that, you often come across like hardcore rugby fans, and they know me and they know my stats, and it's quite nice when someone, oh yeah, I remember you.
I love it. They know your stats. That's very detailed.
Yeah, some of them know stats and teams, and being an Irish player in England as well. There's a lot more now, but in general, there's not a huge amount of Irish players playing in the Premiership or playing abroad at a high level. Big reason for that is, like, a lot of the times, if you want to play for Ireland, you have to play in Ireland. So right. A lot of top class players, and there's financial incentives from tax perspective and stuff like that as well. So when an Irish person does go abroad, in general, they'll keep an eye on him, or the media will keep an eye and that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it's great to chat to you again. It's been a while. We were having a quick chat beforehand. We think it was around 2018 when we first met, and here you are with your own podcast now, which is very exciting. Your own evolution, which is awesome.
I'll attribute the fact that I've created this podcast 100% to you, if you like, because, well, I mean, I'm obviously saying that tongue in cheek, but I'm sure that the talk that I heard you make all those years ago would have influenced me in some way. We're all influenced by different things that are happening around us, and it very possibly planted the seed for this. So thank you. I mean, I think you should just
You're
take
welcome.
credit anyway.
Yeah.
So we've totally, like, my first question to my guests is always, so what were you doing before your big career change? And we've totally done the spoiler alert thing. We've already mentioned rugby, but do you mind just giving us a bit of background of your career before you made your big change?
Yeah, of course. So I originally was a professional rugby player, and it's hard to believe now that I hung up the boots in 2016, I believe, was it? I'm losing track now. It's that long ago. So I think it's December 2015, I think it was. So yeah, like I made a decision when I was 12 years of age that I wanted to be a professional rugby player, and did everything within my power to do that. And often you hear that with people, a big issue they have when they're leaving school or even when they're adults and in college, they don't actually know what they want to do. So I was very lucky, I suppose, or privileged in a sense that I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And when you have that vision or focus, it makes those crossroads a lot easier to decide what road to take. So everything was focused on that. Funnily enough, though, it was one of those things, I was never comfortable with the tagline, oh, you're the rugby player. It was a strange thing. I never saw myself as just a rugby player. It was something that I do that I love doing. But it kind of, even as a young person, was kind of something that kind of boxed me in. Maybe it's because when I was growing up, I played lots of different sports as well. Even though I wanted to be a professional rugby player, I played Gaelic football at a very, very high level in Ireland. I played soccer, I played golf. I had other interests. So maybe that was a good thing, and makes you a more well-rounded person as well, because each one of those sports has a different philosophy and mindset and network and everything that goes with it. But it was something that I love to do, molded me as a person who I am, from a work rate, ethics, morals, you name it. Without a doubt, rugby is just one of the best sports in the world for that. And lends itself very well to what I do now as well, and the entrepreneurship world. But
well,
yeah, it's something.
we're so digging into that later. Don't worry, I'm going to dissect it until the cows come home. But I'm just curious. You said that you were good at all these sports. Why rugby?
Why? I suppose I played a lot of sports very early on. Rugby was one of the first ones I did when I was a kid, because my dad was captain of the local rugby team, had played in school, was a big influence there. Like, we're talking, he brought us on the rugby then to the club maybe 5-6 years of age, So you're playing toddlers around their sevens or whatever it was, and you really enjoyed it. And then I branched out at about 10 or 11 to start playing football or soccer, and loved that, did very well there, was in a very successful team as well. And when you're at that pivotal age of, 11, 12, 13, about to kind of begin puberty and go into a different side of your life and become a man, and the beginning of that, I went back to rugby and really fell in love with it and discovered, geez, I'm really good at this. I really enjoy it. I played out half at the time as well. And the other sports then, I played Gaelic mainly, is an amateur sport. So there's no route to make a career from that. And rugby was professional at the time, but still nowhere near the level it's at now. Like, even at the time, Leinster, who were arguably the best team in the world, were getting beaten every week, so it shows how much Irish rugby has evolved since then. But it was something that I aspired to do. And you're asked that question when it was a brilliant thing they did in my secondary school, St. Oliver's Community College. They ask you the question, every student that comes in, they set up a video and they go, what would you like to be when you grow up, basically? So it was one of those questions, and I knew I two pathways. I always loved history, military history, and I had it in the back of my mind maybe to join the army in Ireland as well. But sport was my first thing that I wanted to do. So I said, right, I'm either going to join the cadets or become a professional rugby player. And then they play that video for you then when you leave school 5 or 6 years later, whatever it is. So I had it there, and as I said, it was just, that was in my head. That's what I wanted to do. And even with the others, the great thing is those other sports complement the rugby, definitely make you a better all-round athlete. But it was just, I made a decision, that's what I want to do, and that was it. And that's the kind of personality type I am. When I decide I want to do something, rightly or wrongly, I'm quite stubborn in that regard. But I would think it has served me very well at the same time.
What were your parents' thoughts on this? Because I think most parents, when they hear their child say, I'm going to be a professional football player, rugby player, whatever, I think a lot of parents go, oh, well, that's nice. Some parents obviously embrace it and do whatever it takes, because there's a lot of ferrying around and all the kit, and it's a big investment of time and money, isn't it? What was your
100%.
parents' attitude?
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my parents. I wouldn't have succeeded as a professional athlete, as a rugby player, if it wasn't for my parents. Everything I do, essentially, their support is absolutely incredible. In regards to the rugby side of things, there was never, ever a question from them of questioning it. Now that you ask the question, they never, ever doubted at all. It was only supporting you. And as you said, like all the different sports we attended, anything we ever wanted to do, they supported me and my siblings 100%, and as you get older and you look back, as you're a kid, you just take it for granted, and you don't realize how lucky you are at the time. But, driving all over the country, for whether it's Gaelic or soccer or dropping us here, dropping us there. You know, if we needed football boots, we have football boots. Then when we started to climb the ranks and started to do well, going to all the games where they could to support, whether it was together or individually, which was massive. And again, it's that support from your parents and making them proud as well. And an extended family as well. I was very lucky like that in terms of some of my relations, my grandparents who are gone now, God rest them, but they were amazing growing up. My uncle Leo and the rugby side of things, massive influence and support from a rugby perspective. He did very well in rugby himself at an underage level, and he's still, you know, he's president of the local rugby club now, Boyne RFC. So all those people, your support network, your family in particular, are massive, absolutely massive. And as I said, if it wasn't for them, and what I'm doing now, we'll touch on, as you said, in the entrepreneurship side of things, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing due to the nature of the business if it wasn't for their support. Yeah, it's huge.
It's so important, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So no pressure, parents, but
yeah,
the success and happiness of your child is 100% in your hands.
100%.
So you have this amazing career. I mean, amazing enough for people to recite your stats to you that they're probably more familiar with them than even you are, which is quite something, really. So how long did you play professional rugby?
Well, there's two sides of it, I suppose. There's the professional in the sense that you're getting paid, and then there's professional in the sense that it's your life 24/7. So mentally, as I said, from the age of 12, I was very, very focused on that's what I want to do. So everything, and that, you know, growing up, you're avoiding all the stuff on the weekends, like parties and drinking and even girls and all that carry on, just focused on achievement and getting the next step of the journey and trying to figure out, you know, what's the best route to go. And you're hitting barriers that, looking back now, were barriers, and you didn't see them as barriers at the time because you have an idealistic view in the world and saying, like, if I'm good enough, that's all it takes. But there's politics involved in sport as well, involved in anything, and that has a factor. And you know, when one door got closed in your face, right, where's the next door? And not taking, yeah, you do take things personally, but that drives you, but not letting it take you personally in a negative sense. And that, right, how can I use this door getting closed in my face in my favor or motivation?
I'm just wondering did you have a plan B?
The plan B, I suppose, was the army side of things, but it was never really a plan B. Like, it was a case of, no, there's no failure here. This is going to happen, and I'll do whatever it takes to make this thing happen. And I think that's the attitude you have to have, because like, if you can't have a plan B going into a game, you know, we're going in here to win on, you know, that's my viewpoint on it anyway. And if all other options fail and something happens that it's just 100% not going to work, then okay, what's next? And then you take your skills and you go and do that. And that's the attitude you have to be a top level athlete or a top level success in anything, you know. That vision of, right, I want to be a professional athlete. I want to play. At the time, I wanted to play for Leinster and I wanted to play for Ireland. What do I need to do to get there? And even as a 12-year-old, you look at the pathway. As me as a club player, so in Ireland there's two systems. There's a club rugby, and then there's just the private school system. And the majority of players come from the private school system. So I was, coming through the back door, as it were, already. But coming through the back door, how do I get there? And they were still evolving the Irish underage rugby system at the time. Like a lot of countries in the world were trying to figure out, with the transition into professionalism, how do we get the next generation? And Ireland have obviously done that incredibly well. So we were the first kind of generation, really, who were the guinea pigs for that. And you had an underage setup. So, you had your local North Leinster, then you had your underage Leinster, 18s, 19s, underage Ireland, then academy system in Leinster, and then development contract, senior contract. So there was that, right, I need to get this, I need to get that, I need to, each one of them. And I tick the box in every single one of them right the way up. So, right, tick. It's like getting your exams. Boom, got that exam. Next, I can qualify for the next one. so on and so forth. And that was very methodical for me. It's different for other people. Other people will do very well underage, then drop off. Some people will do not so well, and then they'll burst onto the scene at an adult level. But I did it the whole way up. And this is a case of starting every single team, first choice, every single team, the whole way up. And then you hit adults, senior level. And then you're in the mix with British and Irish Lions, straight away. And that's when things get a lot more serious and a lot more difficult for you to kind of prove yourself. And then it comes down to opportunity. Mm-hmm. And everyone is at the same level. And you have to say, how do I stand out? And when you get your opportunity, taking it, and timing and performing on the day, because you can perform 99% of the time at your best, but on the one match, on the one occasion where the scout is in the bleachers or it's on TV and you don't perform, that 99% of the time previous means nothing.
Yeah,
that's how ruthless it is. And
so
I learned,
is there an element of luck involved?
There is. That's a big part of it, but there is luck. Yeah, you have to be prepared, and how to prepare for that is the repetition. So when you've done that over and over again, but then, I said, there's so many different, the timing of it, the bounce of a ball, if it's a wet day, if it's a dry day, if, you're slightly more tired that day, there's loads of different factors. So if you put that down to luck, and timing is definitely a part of it, like even, my career path, you have a lot of quote unquote bad luck, but you have a lot of good luck as well, in equal measure almost. But you keep moving forward, because if you have a load of bad luck, you won't know you're going to get the good parts as well if you don't keep going, Yeah. And that only comes, a lot of people give up when they hit the first bit of bad luck and go, oh no, it's not for me, or, that was a disaster and I'm not going to try that again. And he says, no, you keep going, because as I said, you'll never know if you don't pursue it. And like, a great example of that is how I got my first run with the Gloucester senior team in the Premiership. In my first minutes on the field as a Premiership player with Gloucester, my first year, I was 23rd man, reserve for the bench, traveling, which I was over the moon with. This is awesome. Even just at that stage, because when you're trying so hard to get into the space, at least I'm in the mix, was the thought, and anything can happen, as we're talking about. Good luck, bad luck. Then in the warm-up, I need to give a shout out. He's a great friend of mine now, but Martin Thomas was on the bench, back three. He rolls his ankle in the warm-up. So then I'm on the bench for the game beforehand. So wow, this is awesome. I might actually get a run. And then in the first 15, 20 minutes of the game, Charlie Sharples, awesome player, as you probably know, played for England and Gloucester, gets an injury, hurts his ribs and comes off, and then I'm on the pitch. So the chances of those things happening statistically for a 23rd man are very rare. But then I come onto the pitch, and we were playing London Irish in Majeski Stadium. I'll never forget it. Every time we scored quite a bit. Every kickoff, they kicked straight to me. So I got a huge amount of ball carrying, did it incredibly well. Had a great performance, and I was starting the next week against Worcester, my first ever start in the Premiership. That's how quickly things can change after fighting and struggling and trying to get your opportunity. A lot of that is luck, timing. Those things that happen, as I said, not just getting on the field, but kicking the ball to me nearly every single kickoff, directly on top of me every time. To give me that.
But then you took that opportunity as well, right? I mean, that's the other thing they say, isn't it? That luck is where opportunity meets preparation. And it's exactly what you say. You all those years of practice, get up at stupid o'clock, probably practice, turn up, show up, sit on the bench. And then when the opportunity came, it sounds like you grabbed the bull by the horn and just went for it.
And that's it. Yeah. And that was the beginning of, it was my best season. That year was amazing. The first season in particular with Gloucester, because it's where I wanted to be, and it's where I knew I should be. And finally I was getting the opportunity to show, because it's like anything. It's consistency. You need to have consistency in your training and your playing and that, but you have to have the opportunity to be consistent as well.
Yeah.
And the big issue when you're trying to break in, you might go, oh, here's 15 minutes every 4 or 5 games. And that's not good enough to get better as a player, but also to prove yourself and show to your teammates and to your coaches that, yeah, that's a first choice player. And that's a big issue as well in professional sport, because it's a very difficult thing to do, to get that opportunity to be on the field consistently when it's such high level, when you're trying to break through. So, and, you know, luckily that year I was able to do that. And then I was seen as a first choice in the start of that season, which was incredible, you know. So, so the first, just long-winded way of answering my first kind of real senior, quote unquote, senior contract was when I basically failed in Ireland. I didn't make it in Ireland for various different reasons. And I was in the last chance saloon to prove myself, to get that opportunity to play after getting written off. And I got an opportunity to play in Rotherham in Yorkshire. Andre Bester, who I owe a hell of a lot to. And again, those people that believe in you, that see something in you and want to give you that opportunity. I wouldn't have got to Gloucester if it wasn't for him giving me, because no one else was interested. You know, and that's how quickly and how ruthless it is. As I said, consistently throughout my underage career, you know, top 1 percentile the whole way up. And then within a year, you're on the scrap heap. And then within another year, I'm playing in the back line of the best back line in the Premiership. That's professional sport.
What an amazing transition. What's happening in your head? I mean, we could talk about your rugby career. I mean, we're going to talk about your career change at some point, but we could probably talk about just your rugby career for about 6 hours, couldn't we? Like, but what's going on for you emotionally when all these changes are happening, and it feels like it's happening quickly?
It, you know, it's similar to what's happening, emotions I go through in the entrepreneurship side of stuff. A lot of the time it's frustration when you're not getting that opportunity to show your what you're capable of doing. You know, there's other things that get in the mix as well. Injuries, of course, is a big part of professional sport, and that's something within and out of your control as well. The injury side of it too. That's something difficult to get over. But let's just put that to the side for a second. And when you are fresh and you're fit, the frustration of knowing that you're good enough. You know, I never had the imposter syndrome people talk about all the time. I always hear people talk about imposter syndrome. I never had that, ever. I always knew I was good enough. 100% you have nerves. You're nervous. You want to perform, but it was never a case of, oh, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be here. And that's my mindset on it. And it was a case of, I know I'm good enough. Let me show you what I can do. And it comes down to people as well. I suppose the type of player I was very much like Marmite, for anyone who knows. Yeah, you either love it or you hate it. And whenever I got a coach that really liked Marmite, I excelled. And that's what I was from a leadership perspective, someone who was my leader and my coach. The more they believed in me, the better I played, because the more confident they got, the more opportunity I got, the more consistency I could get. I generally work better under more pressure. So the more pressure I had, it just seems to work better for me in that sense, because, you know, I wanted to reward them and say thank you to them for believing in me. That was kind of my perspective of it, and my teammates as well, because that's one of the biggest things for me, was the respect of your coach, but your peers in the team as well, and not letting them down. And that was the main kind of, if you're going to put pressure on yourself, was not letting the team down. So that was kind of the mindset I had when I was trying to break through. And then when you do get through, it was a case of keeping that mindset of earning respect and training hard and proving you're good enough to be here to the others. You know it yourself, but just proving it to everyone. But then trying to enjoy it as well, because I had it almost taken from me so many times. I said, I've dedicated my whole life towards this. And so many times you had, within the space of 2 or 3 years, whether it's injury or just personalities and the politics side of it, people not liking Marmite and not believing in you and saying you're not good enough and you're not going to make it, and dealing with all that goes with it as well for whatever reason. And then when you are in a position where this is what I've worked all the time for, trying to enjoy it, take in those moments, that was a part of it as well. And then with my story, unfortunately, it went the opposite direction again. Like the up and getting to, I'll never forget it. Recently, I put a post on my Instagram, the Gloucester Bath Derby was on a few weeks ago. And that was a pivotal moment, one of the best memories I have in professional rugby. I always wanted to play in the Leinster-Munster Derby as a Leinster player, because that was the game. That was the game I always looked up towards. It was the biggest game in Ireland, one of the biggest ones in Europe, etc., and didn't get to do that. And then, as I said, within 2 years, my first season in Gloucester, I was starting in Kingsholm against Bath. And this is a game I used to watch as a kid as well on TV. Like Gloucester Bath was the game. And that was, and I had a fantastic game that day, one of my best performances for Gloucester. And that was an amazing experience. And having the knowledge to try and take it in, because I had almost lost it so many times before that like, this is why, and this is, and the day they announced the squad, I'll never forget. It was a beautiful sunny day leaving Harpury. We used to train there at the time, driving out and just getting a rush of adrenaline and smiling to myself, because everything was going well, everything in life at that stage. And the sun just beaming in. I said, it doesn't get any better than this. This is incredible. This is what it was all for. This moment, hold on to this in the car. You're starting, and the derby, etc. So those kind of moments you hold on to as well. And that was brilliant. And then it goes back to the negative stuff comes in again, because it's fleeting.
Because it's life. Yeah.
Because it's life. Yeah, exactly.
You just want to bottle up that day or those moments where you feel like everything is how it should be.
Yes. Yeah. But you don't understand how good that is unless you have the days as well.
Totally
That's so important.
Totally that. Yeah. Makes it all the sweeter, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that was it. So the first year in Rotherham, and then I got scouted and got signed by Gloucester and had a 1-year deal. And that was the side of it as well. High pressure my whole career in the kind of quote unquote professional. Once you got your first academy contract, which is not a senior contract, but still contracted on a year-by-year basis. Come, season starts in the summer with pre-season. Come Christmas time, you're like, do I have a contract for next year? The pressure kicks in, and that's massive stress. And that's something that people don't realize in the sports perspective in rugby, because for me, I only ever had 1 2-year contract in my whole career, which was my first season in Gloucester. I was on a 1-year deal and I got a 2-year extension. The stress reliever was unbelievable. Like, the fact that you don't have to worry. So that aspect of it financially, and then as you get older, then the financial aspect of it does become a criteria too, because I didn't play rugby because I wanted to get paid for it. I played it because I loved rugby. It was my passion, and you got paid as a bonus. But as you get older and life gets in the way, you're kind of like, right, I do need to get money and I want to be paid what I'm worth. That's the other side of it too. Like anyone who's good in a job, you want to be paid what you're worth. And that becomes a factor. And then you have contract negotiations and as I said, all that side of stuff, and that massive stress comes into it, which is completely outside of the game, and that affects the game then as well. So that's a whole podcast in itself, contract negotiations and experience with that,
Yeah, I can imagine. So what led to you finally hanging up your boots, so to speak?
I suppose it comes back to that Marmite description. When I had 3 very good years of coaches liking what I offered as a player. Andre, obviously, Then I was actually signed by Brian Redpath in Gloucester, and I signed a contract and he was gone within 2 weeks.
Oh
He went
dear.
up to sales. So at the time, I'll never forget my agent at the time was like, "Don't worry, it's signed. They can't get rid of you," kind of thing. I was like, I says, "Don't. It doesn't matter." I said, whether it was Brian or whoever comes in next, my attitude's not going to change. Like I was like, if you're looking at the NFL, like draft pick 500, bargain basement at the end of the season, player coming in. So they don't have massive expectations for me coming in, but I know what I can do. And so my attitude's not going to change. And that's exactly what happened. And thankfully, the new coach that came in, Nigel Davies, it was good, great timing, and that he was looking at the whole squad with fresh eyes. So this worked massively in my favor in that respect. And Nigel, I had a really good preseason, really liked my attitude. We got on really well. Everything just went the way it needs to go for it to succeed. And that ended up in me having a fantastic first season and getting my contract extended. And sadly for me, after the 2 years, at the end of my second year, I was about to go into contract negotiations. And if Nigel had stayed, would have been very good for me. But Nigel got sacked, as did basically the whole coaching staff. And all the stripes that I had earned over the 2 years, and there's lots of stuff that had happened over that period of time on and off the field that I had proven myself over and over again. And how much the team meant to me as well, and playing for Gloucester and everything that goes with it there, went out the window. And looking at the team with a new slate worked against me with the new management that came in. And unfortunately, I went from, when I was fit and able to play, basically being in nearly every squad, match day squad in the Premiership, to not being in one squad for the whole year I was there. So you're going from one extreme to the other within months. And again, you as a player, you're an asset, you're a commodity. As we used to joke in the dressing room, you're a piece of meat, essentially, like racehorses. And if you're not playing, out of sight, out of mind, your stock value starts to drop, and people start to ask questions. And why is he not playing? Is he injured? No, he's not injured. If he's not injured, why isn't he playing? Is there an issue with him as a player? Is there an issue? This senior management team are very experienced and really good. Why would they not be play him if Leicester's a real? All these things happen, and it affects your value, and then it affects you. I suppose the mentally and emotionally side of stuff, that frustration starts to come back, and anger, and everything you work so hard to get and build, and you have it, and then someone's taking it out. It's completely out of your control. There's nothing. Doesn't matter how hard you train, how well, all those hours, all those extras, doesn't matter, because it's a decision being made by someone else, from whether it's a strategic or personal or business. It doesn't matter. It's just completely out of your control. And that's the worst part of being an athlete as well, I think. And that ultimately, mentally, that was a very, very tough year because of that. And you're an outsider in a squad that you were right in the center of it, and you loved it. And there was a lot of new players came in that year as well. There was a kind of a big change, not just in management, but about half the squad kind of flipped. And those new players that came in, I did never have the opportunity to prove to them why I should be there. And they're coming in, and then your status in the squad starts to go down because you're not seen as a first team player. And then you become basically the shags, as we used to call them, the boys that are holding the pads every training session and doing extras at the weekend. And then you're in training with the academy boys every weekend. No disrespect for the academy boys, they're great, but that's not where you want to be. You don't want to regress. And that ultimately was that year in a nutshell. And then I got an injury. The one game I bloody played in February in France in the Champions Cup, I came off the bench about 5 minutes before the end of the first half, and was hitting a ruck and dislocated my shoulder. So it was just compounding one thing after another. And there was still enough time to get back fit, and I was in great shape before the end of the year, and there were still maybe 6 games to go. but I wasn't involved in any of them. But then you have that on top of things as well, trying to get a contract and the timing of it as well. I was actually looking to move because I knew there was no future for me in Gloucester at the time. And I did get an offer the week I did my shoulder. I got an offer to go on loan to another Premiership team. And obviously I couldn't go. So there's kind of all these things. It's nearly the universe is telling you nearly it's time to move on, you know. And mentally I was kind of, I didn't realize at the time. I got back fit and I managed to get a short-term contract with Munster, World Cup cover in 2015. But mentally going into it, I knew I was going back on a not in a strong negotiation position, because basically I didn't have any other offers on the table. It was a short-term contract. I learned a lot about negotiation and contracts and business over the few years in rugby too. And I had actually been offered a contract by Munster 2 years previously after the awesome season I had in Gloucester, 2-year, big number contract compared to what I had been on. And you're going from a 2-year 6-figure contract to 3 months, not 6-figure contract, you know. And, you know, I didn't get an extension, did well, but didn't get an extension. But mentally I was, you know, I was done. I was done really even before I got the Munster. Looking back now, I was kind of lying to myself, you know. I says, no, I'm done, because I'm going back to I'm basically going back to the start again, and I have to rebuild everything. And I'm 28, I'm not 23. And in sport, that is a huge thing, your age as well. So, and I didn't want to do the grind. I'd already done the grind, starting from nowhere, you know, very little money in terms of contract wise. And it was time to move on. And I said, the universe was telling me, you know, next. So that's why.
So did you start forming some kind of plan while you were still playing? Or did you have to make a clean break from what you were doing?
I always, kind of coming back to your original question, plan B, I always knew you had to have a plan B because of the nature of rugby. And that was mainly to do with injuries. If you get injured doing what you love, you have to have something to fall back on. And big part of that as well was, you know, the education side of it. Having a degree is very important in general. That's changing a lot now, as we know, in the modern landscape. But still, then, is you have to have that piece of paper to have an opportunity for a job and a career. And as I said, it was always secondary. The degree I got in Dublin, I got one while I was in the Leinster Academy, which, you know, it's an excellent degree. It's an engineering degree. It's a Bachelor of Science in Product Design, which is a fantastic degree because it's so flexible. It is the entrepreneurship degree. It is the Dragon's Den, the people who stand in front of the dragons. That's essentially what that degree is for, because it covers everything in product design, concept, coming up with an idea, prototyping, designing it, manufacturing it, then scaling a business and marketing. It's the whole life cycle of what it takes to make a product and build a business. So fantastic to have that. I had that in my back pocket as well, because I got that before I left Ireland. It took me 5 years as opposed to 4, because I took a year out to focus on the rugby, which I had to do because it was just too much of a workload to do both at that time. So I had that, and I knew how important it was to have, if injury occurred or if the doors or the walls were too high, let's say. And that's ultimately what happened at the end. So what I did do along the way was I started putting my finger into different pies in terms of testing out business and making money and stuff like that, but things that I enjoyed, like the rugby. And one kind of happened by pure accident, which I still do today, which was my art. So I paint portraits, and I've got a bit of a reputation as a rugby artist, you know, niche across the board, which I suppose I haven't pushed as hard as I should or could have due to the Limor stuff. But that happened my first year in Gloucester. I told the story a few times on podcasts, but it's an interesting story, and how things can happen. But it was Christmas, first year in Gloucester, Secret Santa. and everyone pulls obviously who they're going to get a present for. And I got the most famous fella on the squad, which is Mike Tindall. So anyone who doesn't know who Mike Tindall is, he's former England rugby captain, World
I have
Cup
a funny
winner.
story to share with you about Mike Tindall, which I'll tell you later.
All right, yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Mike, if you're listening, it's all positive.
Mm-hmm.
But and he's married to Sarah Phillips, who is the Queen, or formerly the Queen's granddaughter and the King's niece. So anyway, I got that, and I was like, right, what am I going to do for a present? And I decided, okay, I'm an Irishman, I'm the only Irish guy in the squad in England, and I get slagged the whole time, and yada yada yada. Banter, it was all good, great fun, So I said, right, he's part of the royal family. I'm going to get him a tricolour, the Irish flag, And we had a game, and my dad was coming over, and my parents, and I said, Dad, will you get me a tricolour in the airport just as a gift or whatever? And he says, no problem. Brought it over on the Friday. The Secret Santa was the following Monday. And he never took it out of his bag. And when he went, I said, Dad, where did you leave the flag? He said, oh, no, Shane, I brought it home with me back to Ireland. I'm like the night before with no present. What am I going to do? I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I have a canvas there. I'm just going to do a quick portrait of Tins, and there you go. That's the present, So I got a headshot of him, did this little A4 size canvas and wrapped it up. And we did the Secret Santa anyway. The next day it was very, very funny, good crack. And then everyone was like, oh, what the Tins get, And he goes up and he opens it up and he goes, oh, it's a portrait of me. And it's actually pretty good. And everyone's like, oh, fuck. And stupidly, I didn't think, because, you sign your portrait. So I signed my portrait, and it's meant to be Secret Santa. But anyway, like, oh, Shane, is that you? And I said, oh, yeah, that's me. And they're like, Jesus, that's brilliant. You should do that for the shed heads, the fans, the Gloucester fans would love that. They'd buy them. And I said, geez, that's not a bad idea. So that's how that started. So I started doing portraits of the lads, and they'd sign them for me. And then the fans started buying them, and I got a reputation. I did very well with that. And then I branched out a little bit from that website, making T-shirts for the fans. So different quotes, and, the Fatboy Slim song, what was it? Eat, Sleep, Train, Repeat, or it was one of these things, the song he had. I just made a T-shirt, Eat, Sleep, Shed, Repeat, the shed heads, and they did incredibly well. And I started doing that. And I had a background in entrepreneurship and business and retail anyway, because my dad and my grandfather, and they had a store in our hometown of Drogheda, which was a sports shop, clothing, men's clothing, women's clothing. So I was on the floor, the history of selling clothes from the age of like 5 or 6, 7, selling to people. So that's kind of touching on things that I had experience in and enjoyed. And that was the beginning of kind of the entrepreneurship. So I had that in the background as well. And then, to answer your question again, a long-winded way, did I have something to go into when I was coming to the end of the rugby? And the answer is yes, because I had come up with the idea for Limor, the Christmas. So December 2014, the Christmas of that terrible year, probably the worst year of my career and life and stuff like that today, was that year. So it's amazing what appears out of, a truffle in a pile, So I had that to focus on, and it was essentially, I just plugged out from the rugby and plugged straight into that. Everything was plugged out and plugged in, and it was just a smooth transition. Boom.
Amazing. That's what everybody wishes for, that smooth transition. And it doesn't always happen that way, because a lot of people want to get out of what they're doing, and then they're lacking the vision of what they could be doing. So it's fab to hear you say that actually you had quite a clear vision of what you wanted to do. And, you can say again, you were lucky that you had these skills and that you were having fun with it. And then it actually grew into something that was, able to make money. But I mean, I love the fact that, and I heard you talk about that on a different podcast as well, that your grandfather and your father were role models for you in terms of running your own business, and the skills that it gave you growing up, and just being able to have conversations with people that you don't know. And I think these are all skills that we underestimate, don't we? We underestimate how important they are.
Massively. And that's, the ignorance of youth, isn't it? You can't put an old head in young shoulders, and people are getting you to do this stuff that you might not want to do and you think is boring, or you're embarrassed to do it, but they stand to you. And without a doubt, like, the ability just to have conversation with people and have the confidence to sell something because selling is a skill in itself, you know, and takes a lot of practice. Being on the shop floor and going up and just asking someone and then finding and negotiating with them, and you know, all that side definitely influence and help me doing what I do now. And learned a hell of a lot from my dad. He's a very interesting story as well. And, you know, the never give up attitude, I got that from both my mother and my dad. And then, as you said, my extended family, my granddad, my dad's side, who I didn't know for too long. He died when I was quite young, but his legacy was there, and learning from my uncles and my dad, and then people who knew my grandfather, but then my grandfather on my mother's side. His ethos and mindset. He was in the guards, so the police in Ireland. He was quite high level. He was superintendent in my hometown, so very, very well respected guy, and just an absolute gentleman. So all aspects, it molds you, your family, and who you're exposed to, and it helps you slowly but surely as you get older. You learn the lessons of how to identify the right type of people to engage with, to mold you, and the people not to engage with.
Yes,
you know,
that's equally important.
very, very, because that's often overlooked or not emphasized enough. You know, the people, oh, this is what you need to do to succeed, but also this is what you do not need to do. This is what you need to avoid doing, you know, to succeed. And that's a huge part of it. And the red flags, as I call it, you know, identifying red flags in situations or personalities quicker, you know, and that comes from practice and dealing, because in general, you know, you go into conversation with a very open mind. You have to be open and trust people and see the best in people. But unfortunately, the world doesn't work like that, and business certainly doesn't work like that. And there's cues, and the more you do it, the more you see it. It's crazy. The same phrases are used. The people act in the exact. Humans are so similar. You know, whether in America or Europe or humans are the same, and they act very, very similar across different cultures, and they say very, very similar things. And it's the quicker you can identify green flags and red flags, the easier your life will be. And that's a big thing that you learn from. Yeah, I've learned definitely in my professional sporting side of stuff, and I've learned into entrepreneurship over the last number of years, and I'm still learning. You learn every day, but I'm a lot better suited now than I was when I started the Limor journey, that's for sure.
Yeah. So tell me about your fears, because I mean, we're talking about psychology and the psychology of, you know, who you're interacting with and all of that sort of stuff. In terms of any fears that you were experiencing when you made that, I mean, it's a huge transition, isn't it? Because it's not just a job, it's a way of life, isn't it? And you've got your team, and you've got your training and all the things that you've been used to for so many years. What are the fears that were coming up for you?
It wasn't fear. I had no fear. Same as the rugby side of the stuff. I knew I was 100% capable of doing, and it was fresh. It was exciting in a way. It was more exciting than anything for me at the end of the rugby career. And it was a gradual process. Usually it's people like they retire at the end of the season, they hang up the boots, and then like, oh, now what? Or that's finished and it's done. They know they have their last game, and that's. I never had that. I never made an announcement, I'm retired, thank you, kind of thing for me, because it was still kind of, when I was doing the Limor thing, I finished with Munster and I still had an agent, because this was at the beginning of the season. So like I did pre-season and I played maybe 6 weeks or whatever it was. So there was still a full year to go in rugby. And I was a free agent, and I had an excellent CV, an excellent reputation, and my agent was looking, but there was nothing of interest that was coming up. And as I said, mentally, I was checked out. So if something came up, I'll look at it. If I didn't like it, I wasn't going to do it. I wanted to look at doing the Limor thing. So there was that kind of thing in the background was there, but I didn't really want to do that. So it wasn't a fear. It was more of the year leading up to that period of time was my really hard time. You know, that mentally, you know, quite a dark place, because I knew this is the end. I just knew in my gut, the way things were going, this is not good. And it was more, again, you're going from the frustration into anger because it's being taken from you, and then out of your control. Not as if I was playing shit. I didn't even have the opportunity to play shit. And that was a thing. And it was more regret because I knew I wasn't going to achieve the things within that chosen domain that I wanted to achieve, like, obviously proving myself and getting a certain amount of caps and tries and playing in the Premiership and getting my Irish cap. Playing for Ireland was my dream. I didn't get to do that. All that stuff I knew was being taken. So that was a regret. You go into from the fear is more regretting in that career, because I knew that was gone. That was done. It was ending. And then I kind of had to accept that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that first part of our chat, and the second part where we talk about what he's been up to since hanging up his boots will be available very soon. So don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening.